Welcome to Give It To Me Straight, the podcast from Dazzy IT. Each week, we break down technology, cybersecurity, AI, and business IT into practical insights you can actually use. Now, here's your host, Shane Knorr.
Guys, and welcome back to another edition of Give It To Me Straight, where we dive into real-world IT questions and issues that we get from our clients. And we want to bring some of this to you for your general knowledge and to cover these topics in detail. I am thrilled to have Logan Willson join us again. Logan, welcome back. I appreciate you hopping back on with us. Excited to have a discussion with you today around a topic that I think is of huge importance in our local areas.
Absolutely. It's great to be back, Shane.
Well, fantastic. Logan, one of the things that I want to cover today, because it's of topical importance, we're seeing it in the news quite a bit. We work a lot with local government, city municipalities, other organizations that are in that municipal realm. And the topic that comes up is SCADA networks. Can you kind of help dive into what do we mean when we start talking about SCADA networks?
So SCADA, IT, full of acronyms, it stands for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. And in layman's terms, that just means equipment that monitors other equipment. So in a water SCADA environment, your SCADA will keep track of how full a water tank is or the quality of a line. And it's very critical to a lot of cities, especially when it comes to their wastewater or water treatment plants.
Gotcha. So basically, if you're a city municipality, you've most likely got a water department. You most likely have a sewer department. And in the old school way of doing things, there were, physical valves and controls that someone had to go physically touch to monitor, to maintain, and those type of things. So if I understand correctly, the SCADA component brings that into a connectivity perspective where it can connect to the network.
Absolutely. It utilizes equipment known as two different types of equipment, PLCs and RTUs. And these are just electronic pieces of equipment that are able to communicate back to a computer or other workstation to more easily manipulate that without having to dive into physical gauges or valves.
So there's still that physical component that you have to control a valve or, a measurement instrument, if you will. But we're enabling it to be a little smarter where we can control it remotely. We can collect data and store that data in a computerized format. So we're seeing a lot of cities have moved to this in recent years. Not all cities have this in place, but quite a few do. Am I correct there?
Yeah, you would be correct.
Okay. So the reason I think this is important, we've a large portion of our client base is made up of local cities. And we've been having this conversation for years when it comes to it's great to be able to connect these devices to the network. It allows people to work remotely. It allows people to control things remotely. So if there's an issue, someone doesn't have to get out of bed at midnight and drive into the water plant. They can actually log on and see what's going on. So there's the convenience factor, but with that comes inherent risk. And one of the things that has been in the news in the last week or two that has really brought this to a head, there's been some advisories issued by the federal government from CISA specifically around SCADA networks. Can you kind of talk through what that involves?
So what we're seeing a lot of is reports of PLC equipment, what we mentioned earlier, those electronic components that manage the physical gauges themselves, getting breached. And so these attackers are modifying passwords, adjusting IP addresses associated with this equipment, and in some cases even causing actual water quality degradation.
And that kind of goes back to where we see the federal government issuing these advisories because of the fact that if a threat actor gets access to these systems, let's say, for example, you put fluoride in your drinking water, and that's controlled through a valve or a mechanism that is connected to the network. If a bad actor gets a hold of that, they could potentially up the dosage of fluoride, right?
They could even decrease it and cause further problems.
Yeah. So it's serious enough that the federal government has said, hey, all municipal organizations that maintain connectivity to these type of systems need to be hyper aware of what's going on and take appropriate measures to protect those, because they have seen a noticeable uptick in attacks in the last, several weeks. They feel like that's probably driven by foreign state actors that are taking advantage and looking for those vulnerabilities. But if you're a local city, municipality, or even just a water district, and you are connecting your systems to the network and to the internet, there are some things that really need to happen. And why don't you step us through some of the basics of what a municipality or water district should be doing to help appropriately cover this?
Sure. And pull it back a little bit. This isn't some magic network worm or something that's going through getting these. Realistically, what's happening is just a lot of places are not implementing best security practices to protect their systems. So a lot of these places are getting in because someone's been using the same password for the last 20 years on their system. These PLCs or the SCADA web interface itself, or in a lot of cases, many providers will utilize a cellular connection to get networking to these devices, are just open to public internet. They're easily findable online. There's no protection blocking somebody from being able to just see it and get to it. And so whenever you have your system exposed like that, it makes it a lot easier for an attacker to be able to jump in and mess with it, whether by adjusting passwords, finding a weak password and rotating it, or getting the ability to adjust an IP address. All of that is easily preventable by making sure you either ultimately the best method is to just keep those systems off the internet, but you lose that functionality we've been discussing about SCADA. The next best step is to make sure that you are protecting those systems behind a firewall and having proper security measures in place on that firewall to limit access to only trusted entities or network locations, network paths, and keeping it as locked down as possible.
And you hit on a few key points I want to dive into because it's not, these security protocols, like you said, aren't really different than anything else that you need to secure and protect in the city environment. Making sure that you follow those security protocols with a, password policy, making sure that VPN access is restricted and controlled and updated, making sure that firmware is applied to these devices, making sure that you segment those from the rest of the network so that your SCADA network is not part of the general internet or local networks. Um, so all of that is kind of, I won't say basic, but it's typical security approaches that you want to do across the entire network. Where I think we have seen some concerns is that a lot of times in these environments, because they're not in an office environment, typically, it's going to be a treatment facility, it's going to be pretty hardened environment or rugged environment, I guess is a better way to put that. And a lot of times people think of those differently than they would a business environment. So they may not think, well, hey, I need to protect this. Or I just need network connectivity or internet connectivity. I don't necessarily need to do all that fancy stuff. And that's where people get into trouble.
Absolutely. And I mean, ultimately, those locations realistically need more protection than a standard business environment. We're talking about business critical, mission critical systems that affect way more than your standard office worker environment. Water systems affect everybody in a city, and if that gets compromised in any way, it's a big mess to clean up.
Absolutely. Well, we've even seen instances where, because a lot of the times the folks that are working in these environments, they're not technical folks by nature. That's not what they spend their day doing day in and day out. So they make decisions that may not have that technical aspect included, including things like plugging directly into the internet without a firewall. So if you've got a wastewater or any type of SCADA network that does not have a business grade, not just a Best Buy type firewall, but a business grade firewall in front of it. Again, it's going back to basic security practices, but we are seeing people treat that kind of seriously because, number one, as I mentioned, they're not in that technology environment. They don't understand that. But two, they just want to get their job done. If that means it's easier just to plug into the internet, sometimes they do that. And that is just a huge risk that's being exposed.
Nowadays, it's so easy for a well-managed, well-maintained IT department to give people the access they need while maintaining the securities in place that need to be there to keep that system protected. A lot of modern day VPNs are much more sophisticated and will allow you to have that secured access to your SCADA system, to your PLCs, without having to put the entire system at risk.
And I think that, again, because people don't think of it, they may think, well, it's just one computer that sits here. It's not that big a deal, but the computer and the network is what's at risk. And so that's where we've got to dig into how do we protect this. Basics, around the security, making sure that you have the firewalls in place, making sure that your users are cleaned up and you don't have old users or people that are no longer employed there removed, making sure you rotate passwords, making sure that you audit that list on a scheduled basis. So if that's not happening, those are things that need to be in place. The other thing that we notice is that a lot of times cities may have a third-party management company that handles the SCADA network specifically. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Work with several very reputable SCADA companies. The biggest thing for those is to just make sure your IT department and your SCADA company are on the same page about stuff. There's a very hard line some companies will draw. This is my stuff. I will manage it. And you just have to let them take care of that and reassure them that all we want to do is make sure that everything is protected. If you're confident in that, we'll back you 100%. So the biggest thing is just keeping that open communication with that third party vendor. A lot of times, especially in our instances, going through and auditing our existing clients that were having these SCADA scares. Just a simple phone call to the SCADA vendor, quick discussion on my end of things, and that's all it was. They had things in lockstep and key, and there was nothing more for us to worry about. So as long as you know you're working with somebody reputable, there's really not much concern.
So the biggest takeaway I get from that is you need to have it documented and someone on record saying we're responsible for this and we're taking care of it. So if there's a city out there that's listening to the podcast, that would be step number one, is identifying who is responsible for this and documenting what's in place today. When it comes to overall network security, we've talked about the basics around this. Happy to provide anyone that wants a template for managing that. They can reach out to us. We'll extend that to them. If you have specific questions on, SCADA or city, networks in general, or cybersecurity related to cities, I'm sure we can connect you with Logan and his fantastic team. If you have specifics that are technical in nature, or even just, operational in nature, happy to answer any questions that we have. Logan, as always, I appreciate being able to have the conversation with you because you're the one in the trenches dealing with this stuff day in and day out. And I always love your insight.
Shoot, I always have a good time coming on the podcast. It's a good chance to flex what I know and make sure I'm not just talking out of my rear end. So always a good time.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Logan, I appreciate you hopping on with me. I'll let you go. But again, thank you for your time and your wisdom.
Absolutely.